Picture this. Big Shaq, a rising basketball star, steps onto a private jet, ready for the game of his life. But just as he's settling into his VIP seat, a flight attendant approaches him with a request that leaves the entire cabin in stunned silence. "Sir, we need you to move, for someone more appropriate for this section." Shaq freezes. Appropriate? He looks around, confused. The man they want to take his seat smirks. A wealthy white businessman who doesn't even bother to hide his disdain. What happens next? It's a story of pride, power, and one phone call that changes everything. Stay tuned. Before we jump into today's story, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. If you love powerful stories of justice, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, so you never miss what's coming next. Now, let's get started. Big Shaq wasn't just another athlete, he was the athlete. Standing tall at 6 feet 8 inches, with a calm demeanor that belied his fierce determination, Shaq was known not just for his skills on the court but for the respect he carried off it. But what most didn't know about him was the fire that burned inside, a relentless drive forged in a childhood filled with whispers of doubt and endless obstacles. From the moment he stepped into the spotlight, the odds had always been stacked against him. Teachers told him he wasn't smart enough. Coaches claimed he wasn't fast enough. And society? Society never missed a chance to remind him that success wasn't meant for someone like him. But Shaq had a secret. Beneath the calm exterior was a man who didn't just rise to challenges, he shattered them. This wasn't just about basketball. No, Shaq's story was about something far greater, and today, on this flight, he was about to face a challenge that would test not just his patience, but his very principles. What happened next would leave an entire airline scrambling, and you won't believe how it ends. The flight attendant's words echoed in Shaq's ears like a slap in the face. "Sir, we're asking if you could kindly move to a seat in the back. This section is reserved for someone else." Shaq blinked, certain he'd misheard. Reserved? He glanced at his ticket, a VIP seat, paid for fair and square. His gaze shifted to the man now standing a few feet away, arms crossed, dripping with entitlement. The businessman, with his designer suit and smug smile, didn't bother hiding his disdain as he muttered, loud enough for Shaq to hear, "Some people don't understand where they belong." The flight attendant's polite tone barely masked the pressure in her voice. "Sir, it's just a small inconvenience. I'm sure you'll understand." Shaq's jaw tightened. He had faced bias before, but this was blatant, public, and humiliating. The other passengers sat frozen, some exchanging uneasy glances, others pretending not to notice. The silence was deafening. But Shaq didn't move. Not yet. Instead, he leaned back, staring straight at the businessman, his calm demeanor belying the storm brewing inside. "Explain to me why my seat, which I paid for, suddenly isn't mine anymore." The attendant faltered, her confidence slipping. "It's just protocol, sir. We're trying to accommodate—" Shaq cut her off. Accommodate who, exactly? The tension in the cabin thickened, and Shaq could feel the weight of every eye on him. But this wasn't just about a seat anymore. It was about respect. What he did next would set off a chain of events no one on that plane could have predicted. Shaq's calm exterior wasn't just for show. It was his armor. What few knew about him was that his influence extended far beyond the basketball court. Shaq wasn't just an athlete, he was a voice for justice, a philanthropist, and a man with connections that reached the highest echelons of society. But he never flaunted his power. He didn't need to. As the murmurs in the cabin grew louder, the flight attendant shifted uncomfortably under Shaq's steady gaze. "Sir, we don't want any trouble," she stammered, her confidence eroding. Shaq's voice was steady, firm. "I'm not here to cause trouble, but I won't be treated like I don't belong." The businessman snorted, his arrogance on full display. "It's just a seat. Be reasonable. People like you should know how to be grateful. People like you." The words hung in the air, sharp and cutting. But instead of reacting, Shaq pulled out his phone. His fingers moved with purpose, dialing a number. The attendant's face paled as he spoke, his tone low but commanding. "Hey, it's me. I'm on Flight 738. We have a situation here, and I think it's time we addressed it." The cabin grew deathly quiet. Who was Shaq talking to? And why did the flight attendant suddenly look like she wanted to disappear? This wasn't just about a seat anymore. Shaq's quiet resolve in the call he just made hinted at something far bigger, and what happened next would expose the truth in a way no one saw coming. The tension in the cabin was thick enough to cut with a knife. Shaq ended his call with a calm, "You'll want to handle this quickly," and slipped his phone back into his pocket. His demeanor hadn't changed, but the energy around him had. People were now whispering, their curiosity and unease growing by the second. The businessman's smugness began to crack. "Who do you think you're calling? Security? The airline isn't going to take your side." Shaq didn't respond, but the faintest hint of a smile played on his lips. He didn't need to argue. His actions would speak louder. Moments later, the plane's intercom crackled. "This is your captain speaking. We're experiencing a slight delay. Please remain seated as we address an urgent matter." The flight attendant's face went pale as her radio buzzed. She stepped away to answer, her hushed voice betraying her nervousness. Meanwhile, Shaq sat motionless, his calm presence both unsettling and commanding. Passengers were now exchanging confused glances, some quietly recording the scene on their phones. The murmurs grew louder as the businessman shifted uncomfortably, his confidence visibly eroding. Then the flight attendant returned, her face a mask of forced composure. "Sir, there seems to be a misunderstanding. If you'd like, we can find another arrangement for—" But she didn't finish. At that moment, a man in a crisp suit boarded the plane, flanked by two assistants. He wasn't just any airline employee. His authority was evident in every step he took. He approached Shaq with a firm handshake and a respectful nod. "Mr. Shaq, I'm terribly sorry for this inconvenience. Rest assured this matter is being addressed at the highest level." The businessman's face turned ashen. He sputtered, "What's going on?" "Who are you?" The man turned, his tone icy. "I'm the airline's regional director, and I've been informed of unacceptable behavior on this flight." He glanced at Shaq, then back at the businessman, his gaze hardening. "Rest assured, appropriate action will be taken." The air was electric. The passengers were on edge, waiting to see what would happen next. But the full scope of Shaq's influence and the consequences for those involved was still unfolding. The businessman's arrogant smirk had vanished, replaced by visible unease. He fumbled for words, but before he could speak, the regional director raised a hand to silence him. Turning to the flight attendant, the director asked, "Is this the passenger you attempted to relocate?" She nodded hesitantly, her earlier confidence completely shattered. The director's expression hardened. "Do you have any idea who this man is? Mr. Shaq is not just a valued customer. He's a key partner in one of our major charity initiatives, the very initiative that funds underprivileged youth scholarships, including a program supported by this airline." Gasps rippled through the cabin. The businessman paled, his confidence crumbling. He stammered, "I didn't know. I thought—" Shaq, who had remained silent until now, finally spoke. His voice was calm but carried a weight that silenced the entire cabin. "You thought I didn't belong here, that I wasn't good enough to sit in this seat. Isn't that right?" The businessman squirmed, unable to meet Shaq's piercing gaze, but Shaq wasn't done. "You see, people like me, we don't just play the game. We change it. And when we encounter moments like this, we don't just let them slide. We make sure they never happen again." The regional director turned back to the flight attendant and businessman, his tone unyielding. "This behavior is unacceptable. Effective immediately, you," he pointed at the businessman, "will be escorted off this flight. And as for you," he addressed the flight attendant, Your actions will be reviewed by our ethics committee. Consider yourself on suspension until further notice." The businessman began to protest, his voice rising in panic, but security personnel had already arrived to escort him off the plane. As they led him away, Shaq leaned back in his seat, his expression unreadable. The murmurs among the passengers swelled, many now looking at Shaq with a mix of admiration and awe. But the story wasn't over yet, because the fallout from this incident was only beginning. The plane finally took off, and the once tense cabin settled into an uneasy calm. But for Shaq, the journey wasn't just about getting to his destination. It was about setting an example. By the time the flight landed, the incident had already made its way onto social media. Passengers had shared videos of Shaq's calm defiance and the airline's swift response. Within hours, the story went viral, sparking conversations about privilege, respect, and the power of standing up against discrimination. The airline released an official statement, apologizing to Shaq and announcing that the flight attendant and businessman's actions did not reflect their values. But they didn't stop there. To show their commitment to change, they pledged to partner with Shaq's foundation to expand their diversity training and increase funding for programs supporting marginalized communities. As for Shaq, he didn't need to say much. In a single tweet, he wrote, "Respect isn't just given, it's earned. And when it's denied, you fight for it with grace and purpose. Always." The morale of the story: it's not about the seat you're assigned in life, it's about what you do when someone tries to take it away. Shaq's quiet strength and unshakable principles reminded the world of a simple truth. True power lies not in how loud you speak, but in how firmly you stand. And in the end, justice wasn't just served. It was a lesson etched into the hearts of everyone who witnessed it. Thank you for watching. Maya's story reminds us that standing up for what's right can create lasting change. Whether it's overcoming adversity or challenging injustice, your voice matters. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment with your thoughts on the story. Let's keep this conversation going. And remember, sharing these stories helps spread the message of justice and fairness, one act of courage at a time. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it today.